The games on this list have their fair share of redeeming qualities, but a cohesive, satisfying conclusion isn't one of them. Bad endings can fizzle out prematurely or take a disastrous turn away from the gameplay or narrative tropes established in the preceding chapters. Both of these unwanted scenarios and more can be found on this list. These are the top 10 bad endings in good games. Far Cry 3 boasts a wonderfully crafted open world, meaningful progression, and fantastic gunplay, but its ending reaffirmed our suspicions that the whole narrative wasn't anything special to begin with. The ever-present goal of saving your friends stranded on a vacation gone wrong comes to a head when you're presented with an option to free them or embrace your own insanity and kill them. A pretty heavy choice for a game that at best had us minimally invested in its plot and characters. Throw in a first-person sex scene ending in a fatal stabbing and the whole thing feels like a cheap attempt to shock audiences with a risque twist. Doom 2 is a superb first-person shooter, but the ending is a terrible letdown. Only after traversing an odyssey of action-packed, enemy-infested levels do you face the final satanic mastermind, a wall. Yep, the final boss of Doom 2 is a big wall with a demon face painted on it. You shoot the wall, and it dies. Famously, designer John Romero's head is impaled on a stick behind the wall, but unless you're using clipping cheats, you'll never see it. Love it or hate it, Final Fantasy VIII remains one of the most critically acclaimed entries in the series. The final act, however, takes a sharp left turn, unraveling in a series of cheap and convoluted cliches. First, there's the amnesia that, unbeknownst to the player, has been affecting most of the main characters for the entire game. Then there's the time-traveling villain that appears out of literally nowhere with the goal of compressing time into a single catastrophic moment. These bizarre twists are followed by an enormity of time travel, a trip to space, and a very long, very anticlimactic series of vignettes that shed some light on the fates of a few characters, but leave a lot to be desired. Diablo 3 has come a long way since its launch in 2012. Disastrous endgame progression and itemization has been patched to near perfection, but one thing patches can't fix is the disappointing conclusion to the game's generally underwhelming story. An insultingly obvious twist followed by an hour of Diablo's relentless and generic monologuing managed to make the previously uncommunicative and intimidating Lord of Terror feel like a poorly written cartoon villain.
All creation will be the realm of terror.
The sequel to 1998's Metal Gear Solid is a mostly excellent stealth action title worthy of the MGS moniker. Sneaking around Big Shell and eliminating members of the Dead Cell introduces us to a cast of memorable characters like Olga, Fortune, and M. Emmerich. It's a shame then to learn that none of it really matters in the way that we thought it did. After reaching the closing moments of Sons of Liberty and having finally formed some sort of connection with the game's new protagonist, Raiden, we're informed that the whole game is actually just a simulation, the Colonel a robot AI, and the plot seemingly inconsequential. Black Mesa is often hailed as one of the most intelligently designed locations in any first-person shooter. So when the end of Half-Life completely throws it out the window in favor of the otherworldly Zen, things go downhill. Its soulless appearance and frustrating platforming feel alien in all the wrong ways. A mediocre Quake level grafted onto the end of a superbly balanced, perfectly scripted campaign, the only saving grace of Half-Life's disappointing conclusion is the brilliant narrative exchange between G-Man and Gordon Freeman that resolves this otherwise unnecessary anticlimax. BioShock is a thrilling roller coaster ride culminating in one of gaming's most meaningful plot twists. But instead of wrapping things up immediately after the game's legendary epiphany, the story stumbles along awkwardly for hours before fizzling out in a forgettable boss fight, capped off by one of 3 uninspired endings. If you put down the game after the revelatory encounter with Andrew Ryan, you wouldn't be missing out on much. Ghosts 'n Goblins' ending is cruelty incarnate. After navigating several of the most punishing stages that 8-bit platforming has to offer, the player squares off against the final boss only to learn that it was all an illusion. To reach the real ending, Arthur must replay the entire game hampered by a weak, substandard weapon. Only after completing a second, ultra-difficult playthrough does the game's true ending appear. Congratulations! This story is happy end. Thank you. Being the wise and courageous knight that you are, you feel strong, dwelling in your body. Return to challenge point. Challenge again. A core design philosophy of the Mass Effect series is cause and effect. Refusing to destroy the queen of a dangerous alien race in the first game allows the player to enlist her help against a common enemy in Mass Effect 3. With choices traversing installments, it stands to reason that the series finale might be a culmination of consequences from a trilogy worth of decisions. However, the conclusion is instead determined by a handful of nebulous options on a single dialogue wheel. Moreover, almost every ending shares extreme similarities. The Reapers are neutralized, the Normandy crashes, and Shepard dies. The only discernible difference, an array of differently colored explosions making the endings feel hastily crafted at best. The ravenous clicking of action RPGs has long been fueled by the expectation of loot, something that Borderlands understands clearly, as evidenced by its innumerable guns. From the game's onset, the player is presented with the singular goal of finding the vault, a treasure trove crammed with legendary weapons and infinite wealth. As you might expect, the entire game is spent in pursuit of this extraordinary arsenal. But the promise of the vault goes unfulfilled in spectacular fashion. In place of the prize is a boss, whose defeat ends up closing the vault, prompting the game's AI to inform us,
"The key won't open the vault for another 200 years, but I'm sure Tannis will pay you quite the fortune for it."
Talk about the ultimate letdown. That was our list, but what do you think? Let us know in the comments, and for all things video games, keep it right here on IGN.